Whispers from the Well, the haunting that followed me home. Last year, I rented a small cabin in the woods for the weekend to escape the noise of the city. It was a cozy two-story building with wooden walls, a fireplace, and large windows overlooking a dense forest. The owner advertised it as the perfect spot for a solitary retreat. Unfortunately, I didn't pay much attention to a few odd reviews mentioning an unusual atmosphere and whispers at night. The drive to the cabin was winding, cutting through dense forests that seemed to grow darker as the sun began to set. I arrived late in the evening and immediately noticed the eerie isolation. There were no other cabins or people around, just an overwhelming silence occasionally broken by the distant hoot of an owl. Inside, everything seemed normal. Clean rooms, fresh linens, an old but functional fireplace. Yet the feeling that someone was watching me lingered from the moment I stepped inside. At first, I chalked it up to fatigue. A long work week and the drive had taken their toll. I lit a fire, made myself a cup of tea, and settled onto an old couch by the window. The forest outside stretched endlessly, dark and foreboding. The first night passed relatively uneventfully, except for the fact that I woke up around 3 a.m. to a strange noise. It sounded like shuffling, as if someone was walking through dry leaves outside the cabin. I got up and peered out the window but saw nothing. The moonlight illuminated only trees and a thick fog that had rolled in overnight. Feeling uneasy, I told myself it was probably a deer or some other wildlife. The next day, I decided to explore the area. The forest had an odd stillness to it. I heard none of the usual sounds one might expect. No bird song, no rustling leaves in the breeze. It felt like the forest was holding its breath. About half an hour into my walk, I stumbled upon something unusual. An old well in the middle of a clearing. It looked abandoned, with crumbling stones and moss growing all over it. But what really caught my attention was the pile of broken children's toys nearby. Old dolls, toy cars, stuffed animals. They looked like they had been there for decades. I peered into the well but couldn't see anything, just pitch blackness. The sight of the toys unsettled me, and I decided to head back to the cabin. That night was far worse. Again, I woke up around 3 a.m. to the sound of shuffling, but this time it was louder, as if someone was walking on the cabin's porch. My heart raced as I grabbed a flashlight and cautiously approached the door. When I opened it, a blast of cold air hit me, but no one was there. However, there were footprints in the dust on the wooden porch, small ones like those of a child. They led off into the woods. I decided not to go outside, locked the door, and tried to calm down. But as soon as I lay back down, I heard whispering. At first it was faint, like the distant rustling of leaves, but it grew clearer. I couldn't make out the words, but the voice sounded like a child's pleading. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once, as if it were inside my own head. The climax came just before dawn. I heard scratching at the window. It was a soft, persistent sound that sent chills down my spine. Gathering all my courage, I approached the window. What I saw will haunt me for the rest of my life. A pale child's face with hollow black eyes was staring at me. Its mouth was open, but no sound came out. I froze, unable to move. After a few seconds, it vanished into the darkness. At first light, I packed my things and left the cabin without looking back. On my way home, I stopped at the nearest town to refuel and overheard two locals talking in a diner. One of them was telling the other about the cursed well where children from a long-abandoned summer camp used to play. The camp had burned down decades ago, and all the children had perished. The locals believed their souls were trapped, unable to find peace. As they spoke, I began to piece together details that made my stomach churn. The description of the location matched where I had found the old well. The toys scattered around it now seemed to make more sense. Remnants of the children who had played their last games there before tragedy struck. One of the locals, an older man with a thick accent, mentioned that sometimes people who wandered near the well would hear voices, soft and pleading, and even see shadows darting among the trees. That night, as I lay in bed at home, I couldn't shake the memories of the cabin. I tried rationalizing everything, the noises, the footprints, the face at the window. Perhaps it was an elaborate prank by locals trying to scare off tourists, I thought. But deep down, I knew better. The chilling silence of the forest and the way the child's face seemed to dissolve into the darkness wasn't something anyone could fabricate so convincingly. The days turned into weeks, and I began to notice strange occurrences in my own home. Objects would move from where I had placed them. Lights would flicker without reason. I even caught glimpses of fleeting shadows in the corner of my eye. At first, I thought it was my mind playing tricks on me, residual fear from the cabin experience. But then the whispering started again. It was faint at first, much like what I had heard at the cabin. I'd be lying in bed or working late at night, and I'd hear it. A child's voice, barely audible but unmistakably there. It always seemed to be coming from just outside my field of vision, drawing me to turn my head. But each time I looked, there was nothing. One night I awoke to find my bedroom window open. I never leave it open, especially not in the winter. The cold air was biting, and as I got up to close it, I saw something that froze me in my tracks. Outside in the dim light of the street lamp was the same pale face with hollow eyes watching me from across the street. It didn't move, didn't blink, just stared. I closed the window and shut the blinds, my hands trembling. The next morning, I found footprints in the snow leading up to my house. They were small, childlike, and ended abruptly at my front door. There were no return prints, as if whoever had made them had simply vanished. I became desperate to rid myself of whatever had followed me from that cursed cabin. I researched everything I could about hauntings and malevolent spirits. One article led me to a woman who claimed to be a medium. Skeptical but desperate, I contacted her and explained my situation. She agreed to come to my home and perform a cleansing ritual. When she arrived, she immediately seemed uneasy. She walked through the house, murmuring prayers under her breath and sprinkling some sort of powder in the corners of each room. When she reached my bedroom, she stopped and turned to me, her face pale. "Whatever this is, it's strong, and it's attached to you." She explained that spirits, especially restless ones, like the children near the well, could latch on to people who disturb their domain. "They see you as a lifeline, a way to escape their torment," she said. Her words sent a chill down my spine. She performed the ritual, and for a time, the disturbances stopped. I finally began to feel like I could breathe again, but it didn't last. A few months later, I woke up to find the same small footprints in the dirt outside my window. The whispering returned, louder and more insistent. It no longer felt like a plea, but a demand. The face at the window came back, lingering longer each time. I realized then that this wasn't something I could escape. I've since moved across the country, hoping that distance might sever the connection. For a while it seemed to work. The whispers stopped and the shadows disappeared. But last week I found a single toy car sitting on my windowsill, its paint chipped and faded with age. I don't own any toys. And last night I heard the scratching again. Whatever it is, it's still with me, and I fear it always will be.